Lots of stuff happening right now. Lots of things. More than just a geomagnetic storm and a solar storm impact. There's some other unusual things occurring, which we'll talk about in this video, I'm sure, because everyone here in the live stream is going to bring it up and ask questions about it. So we are going to do a question and answer as it relates to what's happening here on Earth energetically, the solar system, and everything after we go through this space weather report, because right now we have some solar storms impacting the Earth. The first one is already hit. The total interplanetary magnetic field strength leaped up to about 27 nanotesla, I think was the highest, maybe even higher. And now it's starting to come back down. So pretty significant. And that could strengthen again. We often see with these solar storm impacts that it's a long duration passage. It can take more than 24 hours. So typical would be like 6 to 12 hours. So we have that happening right now. Earth in general is just vibrating as a result, just really amplifying its energies. The magnetic field swings are going crazy right now. We'll look at all the data, and then we'll talk about some of these other things that are happening. So hello there, welcome. I see you all on the live stream. Happy New Year's Eve. We are about to bring in 2025, which is a year that promises a lot of big changes. Really some pretty fiery changes if we talk about the planetary resonances that are occurring in the background, which we may do later on in the video. We have a new moon right now, which is stationed in front of the Earth. Someone commented recently like, hey, where the heck is the moon? I didn't see it last night. Well, that happens every month where we get a new moon. So it shouldn't be a surprise when the night is dark and we don't have a moon, because it's stationed right with the sun. So you're only going to see it during the day, and actually because of the sunlight, you're not going to see it. Which means that anyone that is chasing aurora and hoping to get photos of aurora with this geomagnetic storm that has started, you have excellent viewing conditions tonight because there is no light being reflected off the moon from a quarter phase or from a full phase. So great aurora viewing conditions in Europe, and hopefully if this storm continues and even strengthens, perhaps for high to mid latitude regions in North America as well, even down into the United States. That would be a goal for a lot of people if your weather's permitted. You know, some people are talking about a fog, a strange fog. Right now there's no fog in San Diego. So let's get into it. We'll come back to our sun here. I mean, let's just look really quick. We see just a ton of activity. This is for the past about 48 hours now. And we see that these sunspots, they at one point were completely taking up the Earth-facing side. Now they're starting to rotate out, but we do have new regions coming in. And so there's a little bit of a gap right here, but this region in particular looks very, very active. We'll see a big eruption right there, and it's quite wide and diffuse. And look at just some of the activity that's occurring there as well. So quite a lot happening with this, which is kind of a promise that the conditions that we're in right now are not really going to end anytime soon. Especially because we have this and this here. I mean, these are rotating out, but we do have new ones rotating. So it seems that there's in general been a big push of activity and solar flux from all parts of the sun, not just localized on the Earth facing side, you know, over the past few days, but also just in general on the entire sun, and now it's rotating through. So we'll see how long this continues. Let us look at the geomagnetic storm that has started, because this is really just in the beginning, but we see some of these factors already at play. Here we have our geospace delta B, which is basically Earth's magnetic field and the changes that's registering. We see that in general, there's bigger changes in the magnetic field in the polar regions, and you saw that push right there where we went to these dark red colors. That's showing the change in magnetic field in nanotesla, going up to 400 plus. And so we have this set for before the coronal mass ejection impact, and then I have it going out basically just the recent time. And we see that conditions were calm and normal, and the magnetic field swings at the poles were maybe just 150 nanotesla. That's normal. And then we get that big push, and then we get a second push actually as the coronal mass ejection strengthened right here to about 25, even close to 30 nanotesla. So this is where the most magnetic field swings are taking place, is at the poles. But you will see that this magnetic field instability does extend down, and specifically a lot of it over North America, according to this model. We see that Eurasia, Africa, Australia here, the magnetic field swings don't really increase that much, right? If you look here, it stays pretty much flat and normal, but North America is having this push of energy come down a little bit more, because right now that's where sunlight is hitting. And so we already have the diurnal variations on top of this geomagnetic storm, or vice versa rather, geomagnetic storm on top of the diurnal variations. So yeah, that is the kind of master energy field of the Earth, is the magnetic field. And everything else kind of works downstream of that. The global electric circuit, things like the Schumann resonances, how the magnetic field interacts with our body via, for example, like our bioelectric system, how it moves electrons around in our body, triggering different, let's say, conformational changes in proteins and ion channels, which changes cellular voltage gradients, and it connects to our heart rhythms and our circadian rhythm. As a result, our autonomic nervous system. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that are connected to the magnetic field of the Earth, not just ourselves, but also geophysically. These sort of geomagnetic pulsations can pierce really deeply into the Earth, beyond the crust, beyond the lithosphere, into the mantle, and even perhaps to the core, if their frequency is low enough. There's some research showing that they don't attenuate out at the radius of the Earth, which would be about 6,700 kilometers. So if these geomagnetic pulsations are extremely low frequency, like 0.0001 hertz or something like that, like 1 millihertz, then you could perhaps get that energy going really deep into the Earth. And that occurs during geomagnetic storms. You get these geomagnetic pulsations. We have that occurring right now as well. So send you all lots of love and light, and hello, welcome to the live stream. Save your questions for the end. I'll announce the Q&A. Please save them for then. The one exception is if you do a super thanks with a question that pops up, it makes it really easy for me to see it, and I'll address it right then and there. So let us look at the impact of this coronal mass ejection according to a model. We have our density impact model here. I caught this when it was live. And we see normal plasma solar wind density. We see our magnetopause right here at about 10 Earth radii. There's that increase in density with the coronal mass ejection sweeping by, pushing everything in, because density went up to about 15 initially, and I think it's around 30 ions per cubic centimeter now. So pretty big increase in the density, just a huge push right there. And you can see the magnetotail kind of shrink in and collapse. And so we are being loaded and bombarded with solar ions and mass and energy right now. Gloria, thank you so much for the super thanks. Love and light, brother. We love you. Happy and blessed New Year. Thank you for your knowledge. Well, God bless you too, and God bless everyone in the chat. Thanks for being here. A lot of you, I'm sure, are feeling this. It's been just in general a very slow but continuous ramp up in energy here on Earth from what's been happening on the sun. Solar flux has been increasing. Sunspots have been increasing. This has been like a 2-week plus trend. And now on top of that, we have this geomagnetic storm. We also had that proton radiation storm, which petered out, but we had this 2-week increase in actual energy being emitted from the sun in terms of like the light spectrum, solar flux. And then we had that proton storm from the backside hit us, and that lasted for a long duration, not super strong, never reached warning threshold, but still was elevated. Up to 5 at one point. Warning threshold is 10. Normal values are 0.15, 0.2. And now we have this storm. So boom, 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 new moon. And then 2025 brings it all in. So yeah, really, really, really could be hitting a lot of people quite strongly. And also the Earth energetically. It's going to be interesting to see how these energies end up expressing themselves once we get this solar influence to kind of pull back, because that's the general connection that we see. We see that solar energy comes in, as so long as it's continuously loading in, we don't get too much expression from the Earth herself in terms of earthquakes or volcanoes. It's typically when the energy pools back after that loading phase that you get these Earth energies to push out. We really see that clearly with earthquakes. The correlation is not as strong with volcanoes, but I'd imagine that they're connected. And right now, there's a ton of volcanic activity in Ethiopia. Nothing, all underground magmatic intrusions. Watching that really closely because that looks really intense, like really intense. So we'll talk about that too. Let's also check out our plasma density, or just rather, yeah, I guess our pressure model for this impact, because this is really cool. Here we see the initial impact come in. We're looking at the pressure here, and we have our different planes, our equatorial plane looking down. Here's our north-south plane, right? We see that impact push in. Things kind of return to normal a little bit, right? But what I want you to focus on here is our radiation belts. We actually see our radiation belts very nicely, right? Top down, here's the north-south. And then look what happens. When this storm comes in, basically it just collapses those radiation belts and combines them straight into the solar wind, right? So now the solar wind and the radiation belts are effectively one. We have these arbitrary distinctions in our mind because we put labels on things, but during conditions like this, there's really no distinction between them. Yeah, Earth has a magnetic field, the solar wind has a magnetic field, there's a magnetopause, but there's also just this continuous stream of energy straight from the solar wind into Earth's inner plastosphere, which then starts to rain down, precipitate into the ionosphere and other layers of the atmosphere slightly closer to the surface, like 70, 90 kilometers up. So that just to change your perspective a little bit, to widen it, this is really just a energy just purely just coming straight into our planet. It takes time for that to organize, and we have more of these solar storm impacts on their way. According to official space weather forecasters, there were 3 coronal mass ejections that were launched towards us. We have models that show 2 of them. Here's the UK Met Enlil model. We see 2 waves of plasma, then also just kind of a continuation right there. So they show this spike in the plasma density above 50 and also velocity going up close to about, I'd say 700 or so right here. So we are right now on this. I mean, these models are almost precise in the start time, which is good. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're off by 6 hours, 12 hours. Sometimes they're wrong. Sometimes you don't get impacts like what occurred on Christmas Day. But these models were pretty spot on this time. And so we've had this first impact. We're still in the body of that coronal mass ejection. It could continue to strengthen. We'll look at that solar wind data. But then we have that second one following up right afterwards. And so that could trigger quite a bit of a shakeup. I am Planet Hermit. Thank you for the super thanks. I've been dealing with geomagnetic hangover since 11:30 hours CDT. Had to go into hibernation mode. Wishing you well, Planet Hermit. Feel better soon, please. And yeah, that's actually a good point. I want to talk about earthing and grounding. That's stabilizing your bioelectric charge to the Earth. And so right now, the Earth has these magnetic field swings, but Earth's surface in general has a neutral charge to it. And there are telluric currents, and those are altered by diurnal rhythms and lunar rhythms and things of this nature. But in general, Earth's charge is lower than the body's. It's more neutral, and we build up this positive charge when we're very active, we're doing a lot of things, there's inflammation in the body. And so grounding is an excellent thing you can do to stabilize your bioelectricity, reduce inflammation, reduce pain, improve your health, your wellness, your vitality. And it's especially important to do during high energy flux events like this continuous push of solar energy that we've been getting. Also, like from like a geomagnetic storm, like what's happening right now. So if you're really feeling this strongly, then do whatever you can to at least ground yourself. You can put your feet on the ground. Grass is best if it's cold out. Then just find something that has its own more neutral charge. For example, if you have a house with a rock wall, like the wall behind you, or like the fireplace wall, whatever, is like solid stone, it is going to have a lower charge than you are. So you can put yourself against it and decharge that way, even inside. Even concrete will help you if you put your feet on concrete. And if it's cold out, I do have earthing shoes available on my website, wildfreeorganic.com. I was going to mention these anyways. And that the reason why is because there's a December sale happening right now. and it's 12% off everything in the store. It ends today. So there's only less than 24 hours, like less than 12 hours left on that sale. And so I don't offer these promotions often because I already sell these at a fair price. But these are all natural leather, flat, zero toe drop, wide toe box, help you with natural foot splay. And they also have a copper rivet at the K1 meridian. So these are great for helping you stay more grounded in your day-to-day. And also when it's cold out and it's like maybe you don't want to be putting your feet on the ground because it's 40 degrees out. So those are available. I showed you the men's here, and the women's look like this. And so these are like a cozy slip-on, and this is all leather. So they're the best grounding shoes available because it's not rubber with a tiny little copper plug. It's an all leather sole. So wildfreeorganic.com. That should help you out if you don't have those already. Thank you for everyone that has already, picked some of those up and supported the growth of this channel and more. And let's look at our NOAA space weather model because we also have that active right now. It shows a little bit of a different story than our Enlil model. And we can go here. Just want to make sure I get this set up nicely. And so they show this triple spike. Here's the first, here's the second, and then a very faint weak third one that sweeps by later. But they were pretty spot on with the timing of that first impact. They show it going down and then spiking up again. And then we see this third spike right there. So pretty significant. So far they've been accurate. So I'm not going to doubt this model too much. Sometimes you look at these things, you throw a whole bunch of salt on it. But this one so far has been pretty accurate. And so it's likely to hold up. They haven't updated it either since the 30th. We see our time here. They pushed it out. They ran it at 8 a.m. UTC. And actually they ran it earlier than that. Then they published it. So we have this New Year's Eve geomagnetic storm that's going to bring in 2025. I think it's also very synchronistic and symbolic about the energies that we're in right now and how that's happening. Almost like a sign of the times. We are in solar maximum that's going to continue on through 2025 and 2026 and then descend down starting probably late 26 into 27, 28. But we're going to be firmly in solar maximum for 2025. And so for us to bring in the new year with a geomagnetic storm of some significance is quite interesting. Another super thanks from Jennifer. Thank you so much. Thank you for the solid information, especially about grounding. You are so valuable to humanity during this exciting time of evolution. Much love and many blessings. Much love and many blessings to you as well. Yeah, if you have questions, save it for the Q&A at Stefan Burns. But if you do a super thanks, it pops up really easy. I'll answer them live before the Q&A. So thank you, Jennifer. And thank you for everyone who's watching. Let us go now and look at our real-time solar wind so we can see what is actually happening with what's sweeping by the Earth right now at this moment. And just have to get this set up nicely. Actually, I should probably refresh this page too, make sure we get the most up-to-date information. Looks like we have a solar flare occurring right now as well. Let's give that a look. Look at that. We caught one live, folks. We caught a M-class flare live right now. So we are just now having about a 2.0 M-class flare from the sun. We'll give that imagery a look in just a moment. It's probably still not coming in yet. But here we have our real-time solar wind. This is set for the past day. I'm going to punch in on this, but basically we see our conditions here. We actually had a slight increase right here that it wasn't really much to talk about, but we have normal solar wind conditions at about 5 nanotesla. Here it shows 7. But then we get this slight enhancement up to about 10 right here. So see there, all of a sudden now we're at 10. That's already a doubling of the average total magnetic field strength, which is 5. So we go from about 5, 6, 4, 7, right, in that range, up to 10. We start to have these southward buckets there. This is the vertical component of the magnetic field, connects stronger to Earth's magnetic field when it has this negative, strongly negative vector orientation. And because Earth's magnetic field is a strongly positive orientation. And so if you want those strong geomagnetic storms, then you want that strongly negative orientation. They color it here with this like light purple, So we see all of a sudden the real coronal mass ejection, though, impact come in because you see this sharp spike in the interplanetary magnetic field up to about 25 or so. See that? That's just in the very first shock. We get the southward component go down. We have some oscillation, but in general, it stayed depressed for a while. If we go over here, we have 24 for the total field strength, negative 17. So this was, if we go 1845 to 1945, that's about an hour right there. That little section right there is about an hour. So this isn't a super long, sustained negative BZ. That's what you need for a really powerful geomagnetic storm. But we're kind of perhaps just getting started with this. There have been plenty of times when we've had a coronal mass ejection impact, and for 6 hours, nothing really happens, and then all of a sudden it just slowly ramps and builds. We had that earlier in 2024 with the G3 storm. I made a video, is like, what the heck's happening? Nothing's happening. Well, like 12 hours later, it finally started to really strengthen. And we have that second impact coming in, according to NOAA, fairly soon, and then that faint, weak third one on the 1st. So this could be, really starting to go southward soon. We'll have to just wait and see. But we also see our solar wind velocity here spike up like this. We see our plasma spike up like this. This is our plasma density. And so before here, we were around like, let's say 3 to 4. And now we're all the way up to 30. So that's a 10x increase in plasma density. Quite significant. And our velocity here was, if we take that low value right here, 365 kilometers per second. And at the top there, 486. So yeah, about 450. That hasn't increased that much, not as much as the model expected, which, put that over like 600, 700 kilometers per second. But that could still be kind of coming in. Again, we'll just have to wait and see. So we also have our plasma temperature here. We see that went up. There's a connection between solar wind velocity and temperature. You need enough acceleration of the solar wind in the corona near the sun to get it to escape the gravitational field of the sun. And that requires a certain amount of energy from like a solar flare or like a coronal hole high-speed stream. And so you'll get these two typically look the same. Plasma density, though, can be kind of independent of that because that's just the amount of ions per like cubic centimeter, for example, right? What's the actual density of it? And then the magnetic field strength is in many ways the reflection of all these different factors here. Another important thing is the phi angle. And so when it's around 180, that's when you get the best connection to Earth's magnetic field. And so we see that we are in this zone here. It's not exactly 180, but it's kind of close. It's hovering kind of in that zone. Here's like 130. So we have a fairly good connection. It's not the strongest, but it is there. Let's look at this solar flare that's happening right now. Let's see what it's done. So we have a M-class flare occurring right now. The first one, if we look, the first significant flare actually in about 24 hours. So we had this 1.5 and 1.1 X-class double flare right here, a whole bunch of M-class flares afterwards, kind of a spike back up to high M-class flares late on the 30th, just about 24 hours ago. And then kind of things settled off as we were waiting for the storm. Now we have some new flares coming in. It looks like it's just now, of course, this could continue to evolve, this story here, but just a 2.0 M-class flare, and we can go to our SUVI imagery to see that most recent spike in the X-ray light photons, extreme ultraviolet light, a whole bunch of things. Here we have that coming in. We'll find out where it's from. Right from the western limb here. So I believe this is 3936. And this is the one that's been very active. But as you can see, there's other groups rotating in, following behind it. So looks like this party has not come to a close yet. It's still very much active and in play, this solar storm party. And this is unlikely to launch something our way. But if we continue to get 3936 there, launching these solar flares, then we could get some proton radiation storms, because this is in general where the magnetic field of the sun will connect to the Earth. it spirals out like this. And so when you have strong explosions from the western limb, or even slightly on the far side on the western limb, you have this higher chance of getting these protons to flow down the magnetic field lines. They're not necessarily their own plasma blob that travels towards us like a coronal mass ejection, but these protons will get accelerated and just flow naturally down the interplanetary magnetic field and rain down into Earth, and that's known as a radiation storm. And that's what we had for the past week, and it's just now coming to an end. We can actually look at that data here. This is our 7-day data. It does not show everything because I wish it went to like a month, 2 weeks, you know, all that. But we were elevated in our proton flux here before it started to very slowly subside. Deidre, thank you for the super thanks. Do you have any suggestions on how to best support animal companions that are particularly sensitive to these storms? I think I'm seeing a theme between solar storms and my dog's temperament and allergies. Earthing and grounding, again, that would be number one. So making sure they have a place to ground themselves or taking them outside so they can do so. And then also, I mean, I only had a pet turtle, but I know that CBD works really well for dogs. And it's nothing that's, you know, it's not like a Xanax or anything, but it's an anti-inflammatory in general, and it's good for digestion as well. Helps to soothe digestion. That's where a lot of anxiety comes from. That's when you have these swings in the magnetic field, it really affects your autonomic nervous system. That's where it connects to the most because it's connecting to your heart. And so CBD just helps to kind of calm down the autonomic nervous system. Relaxing music would help. But really, if you do those things, those three things, you know, spending time with them, combining your biofields together, whether this is your pets or with another person, that in general helps. Building that coherence and that harmony with your own energy is really, really valuable. So thank you for the super thanks. I hope you find that valuable. I know not everyone has access to, like, you know, cannabidiol, CBD, but in general, I think it's legal now in all of Europe and the United States, right? So that's what I would do if I had a dog that was really acting up. We also have, I wanted to show our magnetometer data here as measured by the GOOS satellite. We have some magnetic swings that are occurring right now, not only at the surface, but also further out. So we have these geostationary satellites that rotate with the Earth, and they're at 5.6 Earth radii, so they're out in the outer radiation belt. And Earth's magnetic field decays via inverse square law. And so at the surface, it has a strength of 23,000, 67,000 nanotesla, depends on where you are, strongest at the poles, weakest at the South Atlantic anomaly. And then it decays as you go out away into the ionosphere, and then eventually into, like, the ionosphere has a strength, magnetic field strength of about 10,000 nanotesla. And then as you go into the radiation belts, it progressively weakens. Here we see that's about 75 to 100 nanotesla, has these diurnal variations. That's why it goes up and down, because sunlight has an effect on creating these magnetic fields locally in the plastosphere, which oscillate the total magnetic field generated by the core. When you have a geomagnetic storm, all that becomes more volatile. So we see this big spike up here, actually specifically right there. We had our normal diurnal variation, and this is when the storm impact comes in, shoots everything up even beyond the magnetic field strength as measured at the GOES satellite 5.6 Earth radii. All of a sudden now 150. Normal's like 75, 150, and then this big swing down. So you just get more volatility in the magnetic field. And that's why some people feel it's a lot, pets, people, you know, even our biosphere. Birds get thrown off during the strongest geomagnetic storms. Even things like clams and mussels, they're connected to different energy rhythms on our planet, to alert currents, the tides, storms. All the animals that are sensitive to these things, they're kind of given a shakeup by the swinging magnetic field because they have that magnetoreception. So we also have some other data to look at. We have our electron flux. Wanted to show this. And this is the amount of electrons in the outer radiation belt. And so that outer radiation belt is the electron belt. That's where electrons typically hang out. And during geomagnetic storms, we get their values to go down. So here we see the density effectively. It's a log scale. So we see them kind of get washed out as these storms start to come in. We first see this wash out when that interplanetary magnetic field strengthened from 5 to 10 nanotesla, and now it's pushing down even more. So we have that active right now as well. Let us also look at our most recent earthquakes. And let me refresh this actually. I think it stays refreshed, but let me just refresh it manually, because we haven't been having the most significant earthquake activity over the past week because of the fact that we've had high solar activity. We had a lot of earthquake activity back in the middle of December. But what we are seeing is a tremendous amount of activity out of Ethiopia. And I want to talk about that because this is interesting. So we'll go to 30 days, magnitude 2.5 and greater. And if we punch in here on Ethiopia, look at all the earthquakes that pop up. This is pretty nuts. I'm also going to change this to universal time. And the reason I am mentioning this is because if you get a big enough volcanic explosion, it affects the entire globe. We've had Krakatoa, for example, right? Drop global temperatures significantly for a few years. That right after that eruption was very significant in terms of the global temperature drop, and then there's tail effects for a few years. It can be decades if it's a really big volcanic explosion. We even saw global temperature effects as a result of the Hunga eruption back in 2022, January 15th. So this earthquake activity here is all being measured by the global seismic network. We have these seismometers spread out across the globe. If an earthquake is strong enough, the global network will record it. In the United States, we have our own local network, so we can measure earthquakes that are quite a bit weaker. Like California has a very widespread seismic network, so we can measure even the weakest earthquakes, because that's important. Japan has an amazing one. Europe, China, a lot of places, right? As far as we know, Ethiopia doesn't have a seismic network in this zone. So these are all being measured by the global seismic network, which in general has a resolution of about 4, maybe 4.5 for the magnitude. Once you go below magnitude 4, you're not picking it up on the global network. And so all these earthquakes here are magnitude 4. And let's change this here actually to what's shown on the map. Here we go. All of these are magnitude 5.5, 4.5 and greater. And look at the sheer number. I mean, there's a tremendous amount over the past month. Actually, starting back in October, we had this. And these are all from magmatic intrusions that are occurring. We have volcanoes right in this vicinity. Look at that guy. See that guy pop up? Hasn't been active in about 200, 300, 400 years, something like that, a few centuries, right? Well, something is waking up in Ethiopia. And just the sheer amount of volcanic activity here is making me think that this is a more significant event than we may be, let's say, anticipating, right? If there is a volcanic explosion here, I don't think it's going to be some tiny little sputter, right? This, I think, could be quite a large event. And with 2025 being defined by very fiery energies in the background planetary resonances, Saturn, Neptune, conjunct, some big kind of explosion energies and solar maximum, I'm just watching this very closely. It's very reminiscent of what happened with Iceland, though thankfully Iceland was more an effusive eruption. But here you have more of like a stratovolcano type situation where the magma is more sticky, and as a result, it explodes more like this rather than kind of like effusive, like a shield volcano like Kilauea right now. Kilauea just recently re-strengthened its volcanic eruption today, but it's a shield volcano. So it's just kind of pouring out, low viscosity, but this is a high viscosity environment here. So this is, and these earthquakes aren't dropping off with the solar activity because, again, it's all from a magmatic intrusion that's occurring. So widespread zone too, right? This is this could be much bigger I mean, we don't know. We don't know. I'm not trying to freak anyone out. But this could be much bigger than just this volcano, right? This volcano is really a symptom of the Rift Valley here. This entire zone is rifting. So there's a string of volcanoes there that have just popped up because there's been little pushes of magma up from the larger system at play, which is that rift of the Horn of Africa off, like this, right? Well, geology isn't static, it evolves. It is slow at times, but this volcano hasn't been active for hundreds of years. Perhaps now we're looking at just a larger system at play. It's possible. It's possible. We can't discount that. So I wanted to talk about that. Yeah, so I also want to quickly look at our Schumann resonances, our background energy field, because they have been also active as well. We see out of Tomsk, Russia, the background field going from 0 to 40 hertz. We're measuring the vibrations going from the surface up to the ionosphere. There's an electric field oriented in that direction, and there's vibrations that exist along that. And so we see that there's been this increase in power as a result. Thank you, Paula, for the super thanks. That's awesome. You are amazing. So we see this increase in the background vertical electric field out of Tomsk, Russia. Has started to cool down a little bit. It's not the only place we see it. We also see it out of Italy here. If we look at our 6-day strip of data by vlf.it, then, and I think this can get, yeah, there we go. We see here our Schumann resonances. This is daytime. We get this increase in the power of them during the day for the local area. But look at what happened starting here 4 days ago. Then we get this increase. It's starting to come down now, but we have this big power increase there on the 29th. And it's kind of maintained itself, whereas we're definitely in a more high power regime here than these 3 days here, going from the 28th to the 26th. So we've been in this higher power background kind of phase, you could say. Just the overall energies created by the global electric circuit have strengthened and amplified over the past 3 days. We're measuring that out of Italy. Let's also look at our data out of Scotland, right on the border of Scotland. And we have our spectrograms here. This is for the 30th. And this is definitely more enhanced than what we saw on the 29th. And so the background fields in Scotland have also amplified. We're looking specifically here at the north, south, and east-west magnetic components measured with very low frequency induction coils. They measure vibrations going from 0.1 hertz to 100 hertz. So that's the north-south direction there. And here we have our east-west. And we see an amplification of mode 1 there, the strongest mode. This is the first mode, the Schumann resonance, second mode right there, third, fourth, fifth. But look specifically back here, look at all the extra energy that we have in this zone and kind of bleeding them together. So there's been an increase in the background field as well. So yeah, this has been a big energy amplification in general. Let us go back to our magnetic perturbations that are happening right now. This is the most recent data. It won't show the beginning of that coronal mass ejection impact, but we can see the magnetic field swings that are occurring as a result of this solar storm impact. Big magnetic field swings around the poles. We have the magnetic pole in the southern hemisphere here. We have the magnetic pole in the northern hemisphere about here, but we see Canada is getting a lot of this energy there. And so if you're in Europe right now, it's about to be aurora viewing conditions. It's probably about midnight or so, depending on where you are. So if you're way up here, definitely if you're in this red zone, make sure you go outside and look if you have clear conditions. And then starting soon, the United States is going to be in for a light show on New Year's Eve. So if you're up in this zone there, definitely give it a watch, even perhaps even lower, especially if this storm continues to strengthen. Right now it's starting, it's been weakening slightly over the past hour, maybe 90 minutes, but that can change at any moment's notice, and we have that second impact coming in. So big changes in the magnetic field occurring right now and are likely to sustain for probably about 24 hours because of that double impact of this that's predicted. that's a longer geomagnetic storm than normal. Usually it's just one impact. There's a whole bunch of flavors for a solar storm to impact. I mean, you can have a whole sequence of them. They can combine in space before they hit Earth, right? They can be spread out and you kind of get this low-grade rumbling for a while. There's a billion ways that this can happen. But we have two of them coming in at pretty rapid succession, and even a third perhaps on the way too. Two super thanks just came in. Thank you so much, Earth Angel. You rock as well. Love from the USA to Canada. And a question from Pluto and Capricorn. Do you think any of this solar activation recently has anything to do with the sun and moon being in close proximity to the galactic center as viewed from Earth? Yeah, so we can pull that up as well. Thank you for the super thanks, Pluto and Capricorn, and for the idea. I'm not sure actually how easy it'll be to move this over to show Stellarium. Maybe I can show Stellarium on the web. So let's check that out. Because right now the sun is moving across apparently moving across the galactic center. And so the question is, does that have anything to do with what we're seeing here? And we can find there's Jupiter and all of our buddies. Let's turn off the atmosphere. Let's turn off that. And if I hit G, will that show it? No, this is different. But here we have our sun. I'm glad that this worked. Here we have our sun and we have the center of our galaxy, the spiral arm and the galactic center. We see that the sun's been moving this way along the ecliptic plane. We see Mercury there behind it, just finished retrograde. It's going to catch up soon. And so we have the sun in that direction. I've made some videos on this. So the question is, does this solar activation have to do with it being in this location? Well, probably not. But if we want to just play with the idea, there's more high energy light coming in from this part of the sky. You have a lot of gamma rays produced there, a lot of X-rays produced there from the collision of highly charged particles with gas near the center of the galaxy. It produces all these photons. You also have cosmic rays coming in from this part of the night sky to a greater degree because you have a lot of cosmic rays produced in this area. And so when the sun is moving in front of that relative to Earth, perhaps that just subtly influences solar dynamics more because these particles are very ionizing. And when they're ionizing and hitting the sun itself, they're not, photons aren't affected by magnetic fields. So they'll go right and smack into the sun and ionize it to a greater degree. Of course, the sun is this massive agent of ionization, but perhaps that changes the dynamics on the sun just enough to make it a little bit more temperamental, you could say. So it's an interesting idea. It did line up this time. We have had a tremendous amount of solar flux as the sun has gone from here to there. That's exactly what's occurred. But whether that's going to occur every single time, I don't know. But good question. And I wanted let's look at our HB30 index to see what has been happening with the storm thus far. It hasn't been that strong yet because we haven't had a sustained BZ component. But we have had a little bit of a geomagnetic storm at HB30 index value high of 5 right there with that initial shock, that push. And since then, things have been elevated definitely well above what they were, which was extremely quiet conditions going down to 2. So if I go here to the 10-day plot, we can see this a little better. We had this unsettled level of activity for a while. We see that here. Going back to about the 25th, about Christmas, we had these unsettled conditions. We had a storm that was supposed to come in. It did not, in fact, hit the Earth, though it appeared like it was going to. And right at that timing, we had all of a sudden the geomagnetic field get quiet, like really quiet. And then we saw it, increase a little bit, but in general, stay quiet. Now we're here. If this is the beginning of this solar storm push, this could climb higher. NOAA officials think that it'll go to about 6.67, in between 6 and 7. That puts us at a G3. And then they expect it to drop down to G1, G2 levels on the 1st of January. So we'll see whether we get beyond 5 and into 6 and 7 territory with this geomagnetic storm. Right now, it hasn't happened. even though the solar wind conditions have been pretty good. It's a little surprising, actually, in my opinion, that we haven't had the increase yet. We will just have to wait and see. If we go back to our real-time solar wind, I want to check out that solar flare again. We see that nicely right here. Again, let's punch in this time to 6 hours to show it. Well, maybe I zoomed in a little bit too much. I'll just do it manually. So here we have, yeah, I'll go from here over. This is our real-time solar wind for maybe about the past 8 hours or so. And we see that CME shock come in. Field is enhanced. It has settled out a little bit now. We're at values of 17 and -7. But this has all been pretty much sustained southward. Not the strongest, but sustained. So it's a little surprising that we're actually not in a G1 storm right now. But what we often see with these coronal mass ejections is that we get this initial kind of bump up, see how it's rising, and then a slight descent, and then we'll get this next wave to come in. And so it's very possible that we get this second enhancement to come in fairly soon, because again, according to that NOAA model, we have that second push coming. So if you have any questions, now is a good time to ask them. We'll open up the Q&A and we'll start to run through some of these questions that you may have. I know there's more things happening than just a geomagnetic storm today, though that's definitely the most significant energetic influence. And I also wanted to just make a quick announcement that I have the different ingredients that are required to make spirituality come back in today. And so spirituality will be back in stock. I've left it open on my website, wildfreeorganic.com/store, because I knew it was coming soon, but it completely sold out. It sells out very fast. And those ingredients are coming in. I'm going to mix it up very, very soon. And so if you'd like to get spirituality, then you can do so with that 12% discount using the code DIVINE12 before the month ends. So just within 24 hours or less. And I'm mentioning that because along with the grounding shoes, these help you to balance your energies. Spirituality helps you to balance your autonomic nervous system and shift you from a stress state to a restful state. It activates your parasympathetic nervous system. Made up of lotus flower, blue lotus flower. This is actually purple lotus flower. And this stuff is really, really great. And not only does it help you rest and relax, but improves your sleep and also can enhance your dreams and your connection to like the astral realm and activate more of your spiritual body. So we have our physical body, we have our emotional body, the emotions that we experience, those ebbs and flows. We have our mental body, our mind, our thoughts, and then we have our spiritual body, our higher essence that we can connect to. And blue lotus flower was used by the Egyptians for centuries, if not thousands of years, to have greater connection to their spiritual body. It was made into soma. It's thought that blue lotus flower was one component of ambrosia, along with a couple other herbs. And so there's a nice formulation that I've made of blue lotus flower, chamomile, mugwort, and passion flower that I sell as spirituality. That stuff is awesome because it sells out so fast. You guys love it. The reviews are amazing. I drink it all the time. So it's on the website, wildfreeorganic.com. A fresh batch is probably being mixed up tonight by myself. And I put on like spiritual music when I'm making it. So it's super infused with all the good energies and my own energy. So thank you, Jane, for the super thanks. Happy New Year's Eve. And yeah, just keep in mind that the only thing that ships outside the United States are the shoes. The tea blends and everything else is all just USA only. I also have my e-courses though. It's available to everyone. So some questions I'm sure have rolled in. Let's give them a look. Again, at Stefan Burns in the chat if you want to ask a question. Is this supposed to be bad? Like, should I be scared? No. I mean, if there is going to be a solar storm impact that is so severe that I'm worried about the power grid and technology, I will let you know. And I don't think that, that can occur. We have things like Carrington events. We have things like Miyake events. We can't discount that these things occur, but I don't have any predictions for one occurring, and I'm not here to scare people into saying that that's going to occur. I just think solar storms and geomagnetic storms, all these sort of astronomical things are exciting and fun, And we do have to put this in perspective. Like an explosion on the sun is far beyond our imagination in terms of its scale as compared to even like a nuclear bomb blast on Earth. And so these are big things that are happening. But once it reaches Earth, the effects aren't so severe unless it's like a Carrington storm, like a Carrington class solar storm or a Miyake event, a super flare. Then if you need to be worried, I will let you know. But I haven't said in any of my video titles or thumbnails like grid going down. If that's the case, I will let you know. So something to be scared of for today? No. In the future? We hope not. We hope not. Question from Black Dragon Book. Do you think the next CME incoming could cause a cannibal storm like a few months ago? Have a blessed New Year's, Laura from Italy. Well, hello, Laura. And what she means by a cannibal storm is when one coronal mass ejection catches up to the other. And it's some people say it's an outdated phrase right now where they cannibalize each other. What happens instead is they pancake together. And because they form their own plasmoids. These coronal mass ejections are effectively these self-contained plasmoids, these bubbles of plasma. And they actually have superconductor properties. So as the plasma is traveling through space, the magnetic field remains frozen and fixed with it because it's the superconductor. And so when you have them go like this, I mean, there is some sort of connection that involves, between them. But again, as I was referencing earlier, often in our real-time solar wind, we see them come in pulses. And it's basically like one bubble following right after another. So when you have multiple solar storms that launch, like we've had multiple solar storms launch our way. Question is, are they pancaking together and do we have multiple of those coming in? And for this one, we do. Is it going to cannibalize it? Well, only if they're launched really quickly do they kind of combine and create a stronger plasmoid in general. If they're launched at a fairly regular clip, then they will kind of pancake together and move through, but they may not combine and strengthen the interplanetary magnetic field to, let's say, like 70, which is what we saw with the Mother's Day storm. It went beyond 50 nanotesla, went all the way to 73 at the peak because we had 3 launch in really fast succession such that they basically did combine. But that's because it was early on, they were still kind of being created. But once you have it launched out into interplanetary space, you get that pancaking effect. Looking at other questions, do proton storms in plasma look like the fog particles coming down? I saw you do a video on this a year ago. So what happens during a solar storm impact is you have this body of plasma, solar mass, and all these different ions like protons, alpha particles, electrons. They all have charge to them, but these are just the smallest unit of an atom, just a nucleus, or an electron is just, the outer part of an atom, right? So they have the greatest effect in the fact that they energize what's happening already here on Earth. So for example, they rain down to the atmosphere, they're energizing the actual gas molecules of our atmosphere, and that energy bleeds down. Now what we see when we get an enhancement of the ionosphere from solar storm impacts, from solar flares, is we get an increase in the temperature, the humidity, zonal, zonal velocity, like the velocity in upper parts of the atmosphere. And we also get an increase in cloud cover. And so a lot of people have been asking about this fog that has been reported. Without going into too much, we do know we have some pretty big storms coming in from Canada for the United States. And so we've had these warm temperatures and now we have this big push of cold temperatures coming in. When you have that change in the pressure, you can have condensation and precipitation kind of mellow out and become fog. And you'll have further alterations to the weather systems from that enhancement of the global electric circuit from this solar storm impact right now. Because again, I can bring up the graphic here. Let me pull this up so you can see what I'm talking about. Because there's some specific, and actually this will help us understand how this storm may evolve with time. So here we go. And we put on our image here. So temperature, specific humidity, and zonal wind velocity show a clear correspondence with enhanced geomagnetic activity during geostorms. Significant variations in cloud cover, temperature, and specific humidity occur within 2 days after periods where BZ goes less than 0, which is what's happening right now. that southward component of the solar wind is dipping below zero, stayed below zero. So we can expect these sort of changes to our local weather, or just, kind of the overall atmospheric conditions around the globe within the next 48 hours. Intensification of the polar cap potential difference. This is the electric field of the ionosphere in the polar cap regions. That plays an important role in the coupling between the solar wind and atmosphere via the global electric circuit. And so we see that the strongest geomagnetic storms are ones where our IMF, our interplanetary magnetic field angle, is strongly negative BZ. We see the biggest potential differences form in the polar cap, and that leads to these sort of changes. And so right now, we can actually check our clock angle. I have that saved somewhere, but if I go to Australia, space weather, clock angle, it should pop up faster than I can find the bookmark. And is this it right here? Yeah, so if I go to display capture, here we have our clock angle. We are right now at the positive BY, and you just look at the direction, okay? Because I'm going to switch back really quick. So there's our clock angle right now, and that would put us right about here. And so this is the type of the potential differences for the polar cap region that we're kind of looking at right now. Just an example. This is where the total field strength is greater than 7.25 nanotesla for the interplanetary magnetic field. And again, if I go here and go to real-time solar wind, right now it's 18. So quite a bit stronger right there, 18, -7. So we can expect those sort of effects to unfold with time. Now, we had a super thanks from Joe Ellen. Thank you so much. And a lot of questions have started pouring in. So let me look through them. Thank you for all that you share with us. All the best for your 2025. Same to you, everyone. Can we expect physical manifestations on Earth's electronic grids? Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because we did have a huge power outage in Puerto Rico, but I believe that started before this occurred. So interesting timing, though, that we have one of our weakest power grids, which is Puerto Rico. They have a terrible power grid. All of a sudden has this massive power outage. 90% of the grid collapsed in Puerto Rico basically right as this started to occur. I think maybe even slightly before, but you have the most, when you have a solar storm impact, that can affect the power grid due to these geomagnetically induced currents. These variations in the magnetic field, they induce electric currents in anything that's conductive on the surface. So that's like, for example, a transmission line, a buried pipe. And if these geomagnetically induced currents get really strong, greater than 200 volts, 300 volts, 500 volts, 1,000 volts for like a Carrington impact, then you can blow out transformers and cause these power grid problems. Can also fry satellites in space, cause them to burn up and re-entry because they lose their telemetry, and we have GPS problems during really powerful geomagnetic storms. But if you have a power grid that's already pretty crappy, like Puerto Rico's, it's going to be more susceptible to things like this. Now, the one thing with Puerto Rico, it being right here, it's not in this auroral zone, right? So it's not getting these big geomagnetically induced currents unless the solar storm is extremely powerful. So it may just be an odd coincidence. And I don't really believe in coincidence. So if it's not directly from this geomagnetic storm, it could just be a bit of a synchronistic warning for us. Like, hey, make sure that you got all these things fixed up and repaired and rock solid, because that is a possible effect of a solar storm. Some more questions here. How have we avoided a direct hit? We've been hit by this solar storm, so I'm not sure what you mean by that, Robert. Continuing on with more questions. How will drugs and alcohol affect someone from this solar storm? It won't help you. I definitely would not be drinking alcohol or on any sort of drug. And I mean, the only thing that you could do would, well, first off, let's start with the basics. You wouldn't want to be on alcohol. If you have any caffeine, like I had a coffee this morning, I asked for decaf, they didn't have it. But if you have caffeine, it's going to activate your sympathetic system a little bit more. You'll get a little bit of a cortisol spike, but in general, caffeine's pretty mild. If you're a psychonaut, you could have some psychedelics and perhaps connect to these energies that are coming in to a greater degree and pull in energy and information from them because you expand your consciousness and tune yourself to a different resonance. That's possible. But I wouldn't do that unless you're in really stellar health and you know what you're doing, because the energies are going to be more volatile. And if you've ever used psychedelics, you know that they're already a very volatile energy. As for other drugs, I wouldn't touch any of them, especially nowadays with the whole fentanyl problem. Never have touched them and I won't. There is an Ethiopian seismic network, requires a login though, so it's private. So I'll look into that. Okay, that's good to know. ESSN, thank you for that information, Raykar. Have I ever tried ayahuasca? I have not yet. What role is weather modification playing at a large scale? Well, let me get a sip of water first. Weather modification is something that has been experimented on for more than 100 years now. It's something that, of course, is going to be very attractive to governments because the impact of weather on, for example, farming and other things is massive. It's a really big thing, of course. So they've been playing with weather modification for a while. Is there a large-scale global weather modification effort underway? No, I don't think there is. There's not evidence for that. There's not good evidence for that. But is weather modification used at times selectively in an attempt to kind of improve things? That is. I mean, a good example would be how there was those crazy floods in Dubai. I think it was this year. And there's evidence that they did some cloud seeding for rain right before that. And in fact, they mistimed it and all of a sudden they got a huge amount of rain. And so if you're, for example, in the Gulf states, if you're in the Middle East and it's hard to get rain, you're going to be interested in weather modification to create more rain. But if you start playing God, then that can create problems. But is there large-scale weather modification occurring? No, because there'd be so many people that would start being whistleblowers for this. Like, for example, let's say there are a whole bunch of planes that are spraying stuff. Like all commercial planes are spraying stuff. Well, the guy who's loading up the plane, right, with fuel, he'd be like, what the heck is this stuff that I'm pumping into the plane? And it's telling me it's toxic? Like, there would be so many whistleblowers talking about this. And the fact that there aren't, means that that's not something that's occurring at scale. It'd be a massive cover-up. And it's not even possible logistically. It's just beyond, it's a baseless conspiracy. But is there weather modification? Yeah. Weather effects? Well, if you're locally altering the weather and then you have these sort of solar storm impacts coming in, that is just another confounding variable which could skew it further away from what it was going to be. And perhaps things get a little crazy, like what happened in Dubai. There's good evidence for that one. And we know that this stuff has been going on now for a while. So active experimentation, yes. Global weather modification conspiracy, as of right now, I don't believe there is. But there has been a lot of talk about putting in particulates in the atmosphere to block the sun if global warming continues unabated. And that's a ridiculous, crazy idea by everyone's least favorite person, Bill Gates. But if you don't know this stuff and you're dumb as to the geophysics of the planet, you think you can just mess with these things and it's no consequence. What causes the sunspots? You have solar flux, actual magnetic flux pushing out from the sun that then creates these changes in the plasma temperature, either increases it, decreases it. And then when you get these connections between that magnetic field, that's when you get these solar flares and perhaps coronal mass ejections launched out. Still in new moon energy, says Lori P, good time to make the spirituality. That is right. Wolf Mother asks, what do I think of the strange fog? Personally, what do I think about the strange fog? I think it is another one of these social media misdirections. What we're seeing increasingly right now is that something catches the algorithm of the different social media platforms, Twitter, X, YouTube, whatever, and people start running with it. And maybe there's a little bit of truth there, like it has been slightly foggier in some places. And then people are I think there's an aspect of being so desirous of something stimulating and exciting that something that normally wouldn't have gone full tilt, all of a sudden now is like, you know, the fog is going to consume us and everyone goes crazy about it. The same thing happened in New Jersey. People were pointing at Venus and saying it was a UFO, right? There's so many, like 99% of everything I've seen out of New Jersey has just been like an airplane or an actual planet like Venus or Jupiter, or a commercial drone like a DJI. And so we have this dynamic playing out right now in the public, especially social media, where everything's getting amplified to the extreme times 1,000. I think that's occurring with this whole fog thing. There's no fog where I am. Nice clean skies. I'm looking out the window right now. It's nice and clear here. So, and we get fog in San Diego because we have the Pacific and the marine layer pushes in. And so I think if there is any fog right now in the United States, it's because we have a big kind of winter storm coming in from Canada starting the beginning of 2025, starting right now. So that could explain that. A whole bunch of questions that are in here. Am I familiar with the work of Robert Temple regarding the consciousness of plasma? If so, do you feel that these flares that reach Earth could actually be part of a conscious event? I have his book. I haven't read it yet. And yeah, I mean, I subscribe to general resonance theory, which stipulates that everything that vibrates has consciousness. And so we have plenty of anecdotal examples of plasma, like plasmoids, showing some sort of consciousness, like very being deliberate in their movements and their actions. It's very weird. And so, I mean, I have my own whole belief system with plasma. That's probably a little bit too much for this YouTube video. But I think that there is consciousness, not only with us, but of course in other, organisms like our pets and other life on this planet, whales and dolphins and insects and even amoeba. And I think there's consciousness to the planets and the sun. And I think everything is conscious. So plasma carrying that solar consciousness coming in, hitting Earth, changes the consciousness on our planet, and that is then given to us to integrate and work with as we move on. That's what's happening right now. And so we have multiple of these impacts coming in from the sun, which in that regard would speak to there being multiple waves of solar consciousness coming in, preparing us for 2025. But I need to read his book. I have it. I purchased it on recommendations, and I'll get to reading it soon. Thank you for keeping us in the loop. No other channel is this amazing, as accurate as you are. Happy New Year's. Well, thank you, Algo74. Happy New Year's to you as well. Divine says, one of my top channels for 2024. Thank you, thank you, thank you for all you share. Thank you, Divine Strategies. Aaron says, what effects will this have on someone's body who is a highly sensitive person? In general, if you're a highly sensitive person, you're going to be more susceptible to these swings in energy, especially if you're in those like auroral zones, high latitude regions on the Earth. The effects are even greater. So again, it's just more volatility in the body. Your metabolism, we talk about metabolism a lot. Metabolism is the net aggregate of all reactions occurring within your body. And you have reactions that you need, and then you have reactions that you don't want, which would be like free radical reactions, right? Where you have these molecules that have extra charge to them. They want to stabilize their charge, and they're just reacting with things. They're grabbing an electron off of your cell wall, for example, or they're reacting with a protein. They damage the protein. Now you have some oxidative stress. Your cells need to repair that. If you have a lot of these errant reactions, that's inflammation. That's bad. That's not good for you. That is all part of your metabolism. What's your ratio between the reactions that you need, like the electron transport chain or transcription of DNA or any of these things, right? Versus these reactions that you don't want. So people who are highly sensitive seem to just have a little bit more volatility and less stability in their metabolism. Like all of a sudden they can have a big production of stress proteins, stress response proteins as a result of some external factor, or like inflammatory cytokines, all these things that act as free radicals, which have uses by the body, but when there's too much of them, it can be damaging. And so it's something that you're going to have to be aware of, and to really make sure you apply a lot of consciousness towards keeping yourself grounded and stable. And so when you have just more energy coming in from the sun, you just in general are creating just greater energetic you're just enhancing the overall energy field, which makes these sort of reactions more likely to occur. And so you're going to have to just apply more diligence towards keeping yourself grounded, healthy, stable, well. Again, earthing is the best way to do that. Go outside, especially in nature, decharge your body to the ground, keep it decharged fairly regularly. Do that daily if you can. And if you want help doing that, these earthing shoes, while you're out and about doing your chores, you're at the coffee shop. Like I wear these when I go right in the morning. I'm drinking my coffee, but I have my feet on the concrete outside. And so I'm keeping myself grounded. I enter into amazing flow states. And that's really excellent. So I have these on the website, again, wildfreeorganic.com. Divine 12, that coupon, 12% off, expires at the end of New Year's Eve tonight. So use that while you can. More questions. Applebee 1979 asks, I keep getting headaches and really bad tinnitus every storm. Can these storms affect us like that? Yes, that would be one of the most common symptoms would be inflammation, pain, headaches, tinnitus. So those are basically the four. I guess the fifth one would be digestive upset. Any sort of change in your digestion, stomach pain, though it's highly based on your diet, but that can affect that as well. Gigi asks, have I seen the plant wave where a device is attached to different plants and fungi and it plays the frequencies of them? Yeah, those are all the bioelectric signals that plants or fungi are producing, just like us. You could set that up on a human and also play that sort of music. What they do is they put these electrodes on them and they turn the sensitivity way up so they can capture even the most minute bioelectric changes. And then they attach it to the synthesizer and add in all the effects to make it sound cool. But yeah, I mean that's a clear sensory way to get a sense of what's happening bioelectrically with an organism, whether it's a plant, whether it's a fungus, or even if you wanted to with an animal. Some more questions. I think my live stream chat needs an update. Do grounding mats work for indoor grounding in winter? Yes, they do. Just make sure you have your own ground rod that you connect them to. So go outside, some soil that's far away from the house and from any electrical lines, and put in a metal ground rod, connect your wire to that, connect that to your grounding mat. Because the ground port in a building is contaminated with a whole bunch of frequencies from radio frequencies, television, radio signals, also all the excess dirty electricity from the actual house will bleed onto the neutral and then also the ground. And so you're actually getting more EMFs and more of these errant electric field fluctuations when you connect to the ground port of a building. So make sure you have your own ground rod so you're getting just a nice good earth connection. That's a great way to ground yourself in the winter. Lightning in a Bottle says they agree that the universe is conscious very much. Phase we are in is very interesting. Like a fertilized egg beginning to divide, creating a new world. Yeah, so there's been a big shift in the research of consciousness, just really like in the past couple years. I mean, these ideas have been talked about for a long time, but for a very long time, consciousness is firmly in the realm of neuroscience and people looking at the brain. And now they're finally admitting that we're never going to proceed in our understanding of consciousness if we just keep looking at the brain. The brain's incredible, the most complex system that we know of in the universe that we have to study, but consciousness is more than just the brain, and people are starting to jump onto that because they resonate and they feel the truth of that. And that's general resonance theory, is a very simple framework of understanding of consciousness and how everything can be conscious. And the thing with consciousness is that once you become conscious of that, that changes consciousness. That's the observer effect in play. We see with different scientific studies that how it's observed can influence the outcome. Now we start to get into the quantum reality field. And so once you are conscious that everything around you is conscious, then your actions will change, your behaviors will change. Like I thank you to the things that you own, and then they're going to, in their very rudimentary way, probably say thank you back. And so it seems a little silly, but this is the truth. This is the truth of the universe. And changes your perspective and the energy that you carry, and that radiates out to everything. And so I think it's really important. We have a super thanks from Susie West, $50. Thank you so much. That's awesome. God bless. If you have a question, make sure you ask it. I'll definitely answer it. Have I ever overlaid a map of Earth's active volcanoes with active sunspots? Oh, so you did ask that question. Well, I mean, the Earth and the sun are their own things. And so there's volcanoes all over. I haven't done that. Sunspots are always changing, right? The sunspots on the sun are always changing in their location. We don't really have any sunspots during solar minimum. So is there a correlation between the exact location of a sunspot on the sun and a volcano on Earth? I don't think so. But is there a connection between solar cycles in general and earthquakes? There does seem to be that connection. I can show that that graphic really quickly. I showed it in the last live stream, but let me show it one more time because this is a good graphic. And it really nicely shows, it's some really good evidence for the fact that there's a connection between solar cycles and earthquakes. And it's time that some people start to wake up to that realization. So I just want to get it here. It's right here. Here you see the connection, the apparent correlation between solar cycles and earthquakes. And the thing with correlation is that, okay, sometimes it's like just because it's correlated doesn't mean it's causative. Well, what can be really more causative than the sun? Which without it, we really wouldn't exist and life on this planet would be possible and the Earth would be a dark, dead place. You can't really get really beyond the sun, right? If you're talking about more mundane things, yeah, perhaps there's a causative agent that's a little further out. But once you start talking about the sun, it's very likely the causative agent. So we see our solar cycles here. We see earthquakes greater than magnitude 7.8, earthquakes greater than magnitude 8.3. We see how they cluster in here during these quieter periods of solar activity during solar minimums. Or, for example, here, during weak solar maximums, we still get earthquakes. But see that strong clustering of earthquakes? Yeah, there's exceptions, like here, solar cycle 23. But they also clustered here during that dip in the maximum, right? So we had this big solar loading phase, and then as it dropped, we did get some earthquakes to pop off, and then as it came back and rebounded, earthquakes stopped again until that descending phase and minimum phase. And in general, solar cycle 24 was weak enough that after this long loading phase, that is when we got these big earthquakes, greater than or equal to magnitude 8.3. So there's a connection between earthquakes and solar activity, and also that's the long time scale. I also have a graphic here showing just what occurred in the past month or so. So I have to find it in my, here we go. So this is just a small example, but here we have this big loading phase. This is the end of November. And then as things decrease in solar activity, look at all the different earthquakes that popped off. And now we're way up here. We've gone up dramatically in our sunspots and our solar flux. We can actually look at that really briefly too, because I've been wanting to check the daily sunspot count. So I hope that answers your question. And here we have our daily sunspot count. We had this spike up to about 275, and now we're starting to drop back down to about 180 or so, but we have those new regions rotating in soon. So a lot of left, but new ones rotating in. This is likely to spike it back up pretty soon. We also have solar flux. I think this measurement is here. Hopefully it loads nicely. One of the times I had it, it didn't load that quickly. And I want to see where our actual radio frequency measurements of the sun are at this moment in time, because they've been staying over 260. Likely it's dropped because those sunspots have rotated out, but probably not that much. So this, yeah, here we go. All right, here we go. Here's our solar flux going back to mid-November or so. And this is measuring solar flux units. It's a way of them measuring it. And this goes from November to now. So we see this increase in the solar flux here. And we just recently had this drop because those sunspots rotated out, but we're still over 220. So we're still getting a lot of solar energy in right now. And of course, we have that solar storm push that's occurring at this moment in time. Jessica asks, has there been a solar flare of this magnitude before? Yeah, we've had stronger solar flares. We had, 3 X flares in the past few days. We had a 1.1, 1.5, 1.1. But back in, I believe it's October, we had that 9.0 X-class flare. We've had stronger solar flares in the past. So these are strong. They're in that upper category. The X category is the strongest, but they're not the strongest solar flares we've ever seen. Certainly not. A lot more questions have rolled in, and some more super thanks. So thank you to, my chat is struggling to load right now. Thank you to Levan Media. And I think there was another one here. Thank you to Mama Bear as well for the super thanks. You should check the solar flare because something crazy is happening there right now. Okay, we can go back. We looked at that earlier in the live stream. Let us go back to our X-ray flux. And we can use this tab here. We've already looked at this model. We are still in R1 right now. So let us, and we can turn that down. Yeah, so this solar flare is strengthening. Let's punch in on it. It looks like it went beyond a 2.0 M-class flare, which is what we saw last time. And it spiked all the way to a 2.9. So fairly long duration M-class flare that could continue to go from sunspot group 3936. Maybe it is a sympathetic flare. Let's check out our SUVI imagery. Because we've had these flares working together, these different sunspots flaring together back to back to back. But yeah, a nice long duration M-class flare right here that we see. Check that out. That's very nice. So we'll see what happens for the next 24, 48 hours. But as of right now, we already have this solar storm impact coming in. So this could start to perhaps push some solar protons our way. But it shows that the sun is not done yet, right? There's still a lot more potential with this sequence that we're in right now. And new sunspot groups rotating in. Specifically, look at how broad and bright this region is there. So that is a big one that I'm watching very closely. We're just starting to get imagery on it. And in about a day or two, we'll have better imagery. So if you like to stay appraised, make sure you subscribe to the channel. I keep you up to date on all these things. Have I had any conversations with Greg Braden or Randall Carlson? You seem to have a great overlap of information. No, I have not. I really haven't connected to too many established people in this field yet because I've kind of come out of nowhere, you could say. And I'm sure it'll happen at some point, but I've just been focused on doing my own thing. I have so much data to cover every day, so much research to do. I'm writing a book right now. I also just want to be a normal human being and have a life, and I go to the gym and work out and stay healthy and all these things. So it'll all happen with time, I'm sure. But no, there's a lot of conversations that I would like to have with a lot of people, and I'm looking forward to when that happens. How long will this storm last is a question from Cuttlebug. And that's a good question, is how long will it last? It's already been going on for about 6 hours now. Though it hasn't been strong. It hasn't been, a G2, G3 storm. We just haven't simply had a strong enough reduction in the BZ component. It has been negative. Our most recent values here, -7 for BZ right there, 18 for the total field. But we just haven't had a connection. Keep in mind that we are just coming off of solstice, and you have the least amount of connection between the solar wind and Earth's magnetic field during solstice. You have the greatest connection during equinox, the least connection during solstice. This is known as the Russell-McFerrin effect. And so we also have the new moon, which reduces the overall number of geomagnetic occurrences. So I showed that data in the last live stream. I can show it again really quickly because this is pretty interesting as well. And this is something I talked about, saying, hey, like, let's temper our expectations for this because we do have that new moon occurring, which could, dampen the effect of this solar storm impact or solar storm impacts. And so here we have this data, 80 years of data, 1874, 1954, showing the number of geomagnetic occurrences during different phases of the moon. We see the least amount here at new moon, very clearly exactly on 0 degrees. So the moon in front of the Earth, in between the Earth and the sun. We see the greatest number of geomagnetic disturbances around the full moon, and a little bump here around the quarter moons as well, but definitely most of the geomagnetic disturbances, basically the same. This is like a moving average right there, but in general, a pretty average amount across all these phases, except for the new moon, which we are in right now. So that could explain why this solar storm impact so far has been blunted, and we are not in a G2, G3 storm right now, but we have a second wave, according to official forecasters, coming in. So there's multiple factors. The Russell-McFerrin effect, we have it being solstice as a result of a weaker connection, and also this new moon. So, and these solar storms, while significant, they haven't been mind-blowing, right? They were nothing like the solar storms that we saw launch from the sun back in May that created the Mother's Day storm, or the storms that launched in October, which gave us a G4 plus storm. These have definitely been more mild. Significant big solar activity, but not as strong. So there's a lot of things that are happening. So I hope you found this valuable. I don't see any new questions rolling in. I think we've covered basically everything. So thank you all so much for watching, everyone. I'll keep you up to date. We are still very much in the beginning of this. There's plenty of room for this to evolve. Really depends on that second wave. What we often see is that once you have one plasma wave come in and you create this initial amount of disturbance to the geomagnetic field, if you get a second one to arrive or a third one, right, that's when things can really start to get squirrely. But we'll see if we hit that G3 level. I'm not 100% betting on it because of what I discussed, the full moon, the Russell-McFerrin effect, but we'll see. It is possible. We may just get to G1, G2 perhaps. We'll just have to wait and see. Often these CMEs take a long time to really strengthen and really get going. So we're still at the beginning of this. So I'll definitely have an update for you in the next day or two. And if you'd like to stay appraised in between, I do post fairly regular updates on my Twitter X account at Stefan Burns Geo, just because it's really easy to do that there. And if I release a post there, it doesn't interfere with the algorithm on YouTube. And so just one final reminder that all my products right now are 12% off using the code DIVINE12 at wildfreeorganic.com/store till the end of the year. So just a few hours left. I would definitely recommend, if you've been waiting to get these, to get the earthing shoes. I'm already selling these at a price that the manufacturer is telling me not to, because they think that I should sell them for more. But I wanted these to be a fair price and more accessible to everyone. And with the code, it's even more accessible. But that has been a month-long promotion. It comes to an end at the end of the month. So I wear them all the time. They're the main pair of shoes I wear other than my gym shoes at the gym. Helps you stay grounded more often in your day-to-day, just your normal life. And final closing message is, if you're feeling these energies strongly, definitely get outside, do some grounding if you can. And if you want to connect to the consciousness and the information that's being brought to us from these solar storms, delivered from the sun, then earthing and grounding is also the best thing that you can do to connect to that information. Also drinking things like the spirituality using the lotus flower. I have that also on the website, just back in stock. I'm going to mix it up tonight under these geomagnetic effects. So this batch is sure to be supercharged as well. So if you want a very special batch of spirituality, then make sure you order some on the site now, because that's the one I'm going to mix up tonight under these enhanced conditions. So Yeah, really cool stuff. Thank you all so much for being here. Love and light. Just happy to have such an amazing community here on the channel. You know, we're a whole bunch of weirdos for sure, but everyone here has a lot of great heart-centered energy, and that is what's most important. So keep shining on. 2025 is a big year. We have that coming up, and just, you know, it could be 2025 already where you're watching. So hello to everyone already in 2025 from Europe and, you know, other parts of the world. Big energies changing in 2025 with Saturn and Neptune going conjunct. Also, Jupiter and Uranus changing signs. So, and solar maximum. So I have some more thoughts on that I'll be talking about in future videos. Subscribe to get all the updates, not just on the sun, not just on the earth, but also astronomically, astrologically, cosmically. I'm here, I'm your space weatherman, Stefan Burns. Thank you all so much. Much love. I'm a weirdo watcher. Yeah, we're all weirdos here, but that is why we're able to, you know, all accept each other. That is the way of the future. Send your love and light and prayers out for everyone. Let's bring in 2025 with more light and love than ever before. Let's set it's a new moon. So let us set that intention now and actually do the practice. I'll be doing that after I close out this live stream. I'll be beaming out love and light to everyone. So if you'd like to join me after this live stream and doing that, I would love that. I would love that. I would love that. So thank you all so much, and I'll see you all in the next video.